بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وبارك. وعن Surah Saba, Surah number 34, and ayah number 37. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أموالكم ولا أولادكم بالتي تقربكم عندنا زلفى إلا من آمن وعمل صالحا فأولئك لهم جزاء الضعف بما عملوا وهم في الغرفات آمنون. I think we did this ayah, right? We did ayah 37. We start from number 38. والذين يسعون في آياتنا معاجزين أولئك في العذاب محضرون. As for those who strive and struggle to oppose our signs, في آيات, in our signs, معاجزين, so as to frustrate and to prevent people from understanding and adhering to our signs, for them there is a punishment that is going to be present. محضرون, they will be made to witness their own punishment, meaning very soon. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us that there is a significant number of people who try to do this all the time. And we must first of all appreciate that this does happen. People do have an agenda to frustrate others from the truth and to help them ignore and undermine the truth. This is how life is. So the word yas'auna shows us that they understand it takes effort. So even in trying to deter people from the truth, an effort is required. A plan of action is required. An agenda is required. And it happens more so now than any other time that we know of, in the US at least. People are trying to seduce people into thinking that Islam is no good and Muslims are no good and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, God forbid, is no good, and so on. So there is a definite exertion, sa'i, that is around us today. And their purpose is mu'ajizina, that they want to render each other incapable of understanding and listening to the truth. So Allah says, for these people, they'll be brought forward into a punishment, into a mindset of confusion, which is the beginning of punishment. Punishment begins with this phase of utter confusion, which now leads to kufr, rejection and denial, which then leads to hatred and bigotry, which then leads to violence and everything else that comes along with that. Right? This is how the punishment begins. It doesn't end there, it begins there. And this is happening. People are angry and people have become very prejudiced and biased. People are unfortunately somewhat thinking of violence, at least. Allah save us and protect us all from him. As opposed to the people mentioned in the previous ayah, where they believed and they did good deeds. So the correct way and the most human and humane way is to accept what is being said as a manifesto, if you want to call it that, with political terms, of a people's right to worship Allah the way they want to worship Allah and their God, and just stick to that principle, and you will not be spreading rumors and lies and falsehoods about those people. And that's the way that they will be securing their peace and security in this world and also in the other world, where the ayah finishes with the word aminun, that they will be secure. Yes, the security here will be reflected in eternal security over there. An absence of security here is reflected in an absence of understanding the security of other people. Right? So it starts here. The punishment, the torment starts here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of people in this world as He will do in the other world. So some people make it here and others don't. But there is a distinct group that does this, as previously in the ayat we saw that those who were proud and haughty and arrogant, then they would speak to those who are deemed weak in a certain way, and likewise on the Day of Judgment they will continue to speak to those whom they deemed weak in the world the same way. It will not change, right? Their sifa, their attribute and their quality of being those who are haughty and proud will not change because of the abode, this world and that world. So here Allah is clearly mentioning to us as readers of the Quran that there is a group who does this all the time. And that's the take-home point in this ayah for us nowadays. The other is the unfortunate spillover for those who do this, is that they will be in a state of torment and punishment, which, as I said, begins with confusion and then evolves into bigotry and pride and bias, slander, accusations, and then which results in sensitivities towards violence. So if you're violent for the wrong reason, it's a sign that God doesn't like you. If abusing people and hurting people becomes easy for you, that's not a sign of God's favor. It's a sign of the opposite. So in that sense, you broaden the understanding of the word adhab to mean that the plight of human ignorance is so wide and broad that even if they were slapped with this type of punishment, they would not wake up. Right? That's the idea. قل إن ربي يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء من عباده ويقدر له وما أنفقتم من شيء فهو يخلفه وهو خير الرازقين. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indeed my Lord is the one who now spreads out rizq for whomever He wants from His servants. وَيَقْدِرُ لَهُ, and He also confines it and restricts it. So it is my Lord who controls the nourishment and the provisions of His servants. And He is the same one who will then say, this one doesn't need, will not be eating this much, and he will be given less of provisions and rizq. This is mentioned previously in the ayah 36. As you can see, is almost the exact wording, except here we have the addition of لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ, for whomever He wishes from His servants, meaning this is a sign of Allah's rahmah, that when He wants to give His servants, people who worship Him, more rizq, He will do so through His mashiach, through His will and irada, not because they necessarily have the same type of means as other people to earn and to possibly eat. And I explained that as saying that sometimes people, mashallah, who earn much less than others who earn much more, they just eat more and they eat better. That's min ibadihi, from His servants. That's Allah's fadl. As you all know, mashallah, you work 20 hours a day, you barely get time to eat a sandwich. So that's not min ibadihi. that's on you. وَيَخْدِرُ لَهُ, and then he restricts it to whomever he wants. The word rizq should not be equated with the word wealth, mal. It's not about mal, wealth. It's not about money. It's about rizq, what you eat, what you consume. So Allah gives food to whoever He wishes, this way and that way. So Allah's servants who rely on Him, depend on Him, they don't go about trying to earn so much money the way others might do, as being part of the rat race. But they eat okay. As Allah's fadl, His Mashiach. Yeah. And that's the secret. But it's not for everybody, because everybody says, okay, how do I do this? You need to rely on Allah also. Sometimes it's okay. Give it up. No? Does it make any sense? In the month that we give up food, what does Allah do? He gives us the best. He gives us the best food. Is that a sign of your ibadah? Min ibadihi. When Muslims become Allah's servants in Ramadan, He does what? Yabsutur rizq. He spreads the rizq. You can't wait for Ramadan to come. But what do you do in Ramadan? You give up food as a service to God. And God in return gives you the best food of the year. As a proof of this ayah. But if you're not in that mode of service, ibad, service to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then وَيَخْدِرُ لَهُ. So the person who doesn't fast really doesn't enjoy the iftar, because that is not iftar for him. The barakah is not there. You just don't enjoy the food when you're not fasting. No? So the correlation between ibad and the basat, that Allah's service and Allah's increasing of rizq, they go hand in hand. And this is the way we should see that. This is a proof of this ayah. And it works all the time. MashaAllah. Anyway, but that's ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't earn. We're not saying this. But we should definitely ask Allah to increase our rizq, as we ask Allah to increase our iman and our knowledge and everything else. That's what the ayah is saying. Then, the other side is how you then increase your rizq. So Allah gives us a formula for that too. وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَهُوَ يُخْلِفُهُ. It's a very unique prescription and formula. It's not even a prescription, it's a formula for benefiting from life, in life. Whatever you spend, whatever thing you spend, فَهُوَ يُخْلِفُهُ. Allah is going to replace it for you. Allah will replace. If you spend money, Allah will replace the money. And if you spend food by feeding others, Allah will replace that too. And if you spend time, Allah will give you time also. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has total prerogative and ownership of everything in the world, in the heavens and the earth. Who owns everything? Allah. How do we own it? As being mustakhlaf, being appointed as deputies of Allah. No? وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا جَعَلَكُمْ مُسْتَخْلَفِينَ فِيهِ. The other ayah in Surah Hadid tells us, okay. Listen, first of all, who owns everything? Allah. How does a human being own? Because Allah has deputized human beings to be His Khalifa on earth. Right? Through that deputization, we are allowed to use whatever we believe correctly, that this is legal for us to own and to use to our benefit. So as deputies of God, Allah then will replenish you because you're spending for Him. So if the boss gives you a budget and you spend your budget in a nice way, then He'll give you another budget. Is that true? Yeah. So who's the boss? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've given you this budget. Which is what? You have $50. I'm deputizing you to own $50. You spend from this, it's my job to replenish that. It's not your job to say, well, if I spend this, I'll have $25 less. If that's your thinking, then obviously, then you're not a believer. You haven't been deputized. You think you own. You think you are the boss. So here the word yukhlifuhu, that he will replace it, from the word khalifa. And the word khalifa comes from the same stem verb as in the madna. So we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that if Allah has given you food and you give it to somebody else, share it and you spend it, then Allah will give you a replacement for what you have spent. And if Allah has given you money and you share that, meaning you give it to somebody else, and you do infaaq, fi sabilillah, for whatever reason that you have, Allah will give that back to you. So there's a barakah in this circulation. Right? That the economy works on the circulation of wealth and whatever skill sets that you have and the provisions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Okay? When you become a nation or a community or a group of people that fears poverty because of spending, then you have not become responsible deputies. Okay? You have sought to now launch a mutiny against your boss. And the boss will say, okay, whatever. So the more you hoard, the more barakah is reduced. So Allah won't give you more if you don't spend, even on yourself or on your family or for the right reason in your household. The Prophet ﷺ didn't like any Sahabi not to spend on him, on his household. He wanted people to spend on people, including themselves and their families, for the right reason. He didn't want Muslims to become stingy and niggardly and negligent of their financial responsibilities towards themselves. Okay? Obviously without going into israaf and foolish spending and into promoting a luxurious lifestyle that is unwarranted in Islam. Then that is not infaaq, that is israaf. That is now going over the limit and you become extravagant and you're wasteful. Not that infaaq is not only required, it is now rewarded. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that the best dinar that you will spend is the dinar that you have spent on your family. Right? But you spend it. If you spend it, Allah will replace it. It's not your job as a deputy to worry about your daily budget or your annual budget. It's Allah. So bring the tauheed into play and you believe in Allah and He will do this. And many Muslims still do this. They still practice this and they still witness this every day, every week, every month, every year. Year after year after year, they witness this. Right? But the fear of reduction is what stops you. So the Quran says, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqra." The devil promises you poverty. He comes in, he insinuates that if you spend this much, you won't have this much. Allah says, if you spend this much, I'll replace it. That's the way forward for Muslims in this world, so that they benefit from their spending in the other world. So the replacement may be in two ways, or both ways, inshallah. Either Allah replaces what you have spent in this world, or He will give you reward in the other world, or both. Either way, He is going to replace whatever you spent for the right cause in such a way that you eventually be, inshallah, rewarded and happy. وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. He is the best of providers. No one provides rizq the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. As I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you rizq in ways that you won't even conceive. You won't know that your rizq is written here on a daily basis, and everybody here is experienced, I'm sure. You wake up in the morning, you didn't know where you're going to eat lunch or dinner, and all of a sudden something comes and here you are. That is not related to your earnings. Is it? No. Somebody calls you, hey, let's go out for lunch. I didn't plan this. Who planned it? Allah had already written your rizq there. That's why you're going. The person who called you is just a means for Allah to provide you the rizq He's written for you. That's not based on what you earn. It's based on Allah's plan for you. So He is the best planner and He is the best provider. And sometimes you plan that you will do this today to eat here and it never happens. And you're stuck with some sandwich that you have to make for yourself. Or buy from Subway, whatever. Right? It all makes sense, perfect sense in the world. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants human beings to believe that He is in charge of their welfare. And once you believe that He's in charge of your welfare, then you will behave appropriately and you won't go around living in the world as if the only preoccupation you have is to make more money, and then more money, and then more money, which you never get to enjoy until you're dead, 70 years old. The age of retirement, I think, has been now extended. Right? You're supposed to live until 80 years old or whatever. So Allah is saying to the reader that first and foremost, believe that in this surah, where you had the metaphor through the true story of the people of Saba, that they had this wonderful lifestyle and culture and civilization, and they were at the top of their game, so to speak. They then deprived others from what they had, and then Allah took away what He gave them. So the moral of the story is that the more you spend on yourself and others, the more Allah will replace it as an individual and also as a community. So if as a community we start feeling that we are giving every day, every week, every month, then you should see that not as a burden, but as a ni'mah. That Allah wants us to take the opportunity to spend from what He has given us. So you have to flip the paradigm, so to speak, and say that when someone wants me to help them, it's not because it's a burden on me, but because Allah has now written this reward for me, whether it's $1, $5, or $10, whatever. When someone is asking you for help, whether it's financial or intellectual or time-wise, whatever, any kind of resource Allah has given you, then that help is destined for you, so that Allah rewards you for that help, for offering that help. Right? When somebody comes and eats food at your house or where you are in the restaurant, whose food are they eating? It ain't yours because you're not eating it. No? It's theirs. So you're providing them their food. So Allah is using you as a means to provide that person what Allah wants to give him, not what Allah wants to give you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So when guests come to your house, they're eating their food, not yours. You're just the cook or the host, for which you are rewarded. And usually we like the idea that the guest eats proper and more than we do. So even there you have altruism as a civilization, that you don't want to eat or be seen to be eating more than the guest, because that's also khilaf al-adab. Huh? If the host is sitting there on the table by himself and he eats all the food before the guests come, then what kind of host are you? You don't do that. That's uncivilized. So even when you are hosting somebody and you're feeding somebody, you are invariably going to be eating less, because that's what Allah has now restricted for you. وَيَقْدِرُ. He's restricted the food because Allah wants you to give the food to somebody else. So the somebody else, his rizq is expanded yabsut, and your rizq, meaning you're the host, your rizq is constricted. وَيَقْدِرُ. Right? This is how life works. So the beauty of the Quran is the simplicity to explain phenomenal theology at the level that we can explain in that language too. You won't understand it, but this is the take home. Right? The take home is when Allah feeds is because He has destined that food for that person. And when He is offering you the opportunity to become an agent of His as a deputy, then avail the opportunity. Don't scorn at the opportunity. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. Right? Don't say, oh, this is too much for you. Why is he coming? Every day, every week, somebody is coming asking me for donation. Okay? It's not your money in the first place, brother. You're a deputy. Allah is the one who owns everything. لِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. To Allah alone belongs the kingdom and the sovereignty and the propriety of everything that He creates. He owns everything. He's made you a deputy. So when, as a deputy, you spend, Allah will give you more. So that He'll deputize you for more. يُخْلِفُهُ. But this is in this theory that the Sahaba understood the beauty of infaaq. If you don't understand this theological understanding, the theory behind this, then you'll always be saying and doing what we say and do through the devil. The devil insinuates and promises you faqr, poverty. If I spend this much all the time, what's going to happen to me? Nothing's going to happen to you. Wallahu khayrul raziqeen. Allah is the best of providers. So you give, and you give freely with an open heart, whether it's $1 or $1 million. MashaAllah. Right? وَيَوْمَ يَحْشُرُهُمْ جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ يَقُولُ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ أَهَؤُلَاءِ إِيَّاكُمْ كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ. So now, if you're going to hoard your resources and your wealth and your rizq in such a way that you are associating partners with Allah, and you're saying that I will not give to these people because I need to spend on this cause for these people, then you have effectively taken those people as partners and rivals against Allah, and that is the meaning of worship in this ayah. So on the day of judgment, when Allah will bring them together, all together, then He will say to the angels, are these the ones that they were worshipping? هَؤُلَاءِ إِيَّاكُمْ كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ. Are these the ones that you were, all of you, worshipping against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So here Allah is saying that on the day of judgment, He will bring these people in front of the angels and everybody else and say, these are now the shuraka, the partners that they assumed were now capable of doing anything in the world, as not as deputies, but as the sole proprietor of what they assumed they owned. We are not the sole proprietor of anything in this world. And when we assume others are the ones who provide us with rizq, and they're the reason why we have food and money and clothing and shelter, then that is a form of shirk. That's a form of associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the day of judgment, when we will have no ownership whatsoever over ourselves, nor over the people, then Allah will say to the angels, what's happened to them? They can't even speak to these people whom they thought would be the ones to help them, rescue them, save them. Where are these people now? What are they doing? Right? So Allah is depicting this image in the mind of the reader, that before you assume other human beings or other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has any authority or domination over you, think of this picture. Think of this image. Yes, you don't want to kick Allah's ni'mah once Allah has given you that ni'mah. So you don't want to say in a ruthless, arrogant way, I don't need this job anyway. You have to make sure that you maintain the job. At the same time, you must not assume that the job is your God, or your boss is your God, or the system is your God. You shouldn't do that, because that is not correct in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He will then contest you with this dialogue on the Day of Judgment. قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ أَنْتَ وَلِيُّنَا مِن دُونِهِمْ. The angel will respond on behalf of Allah to these people, Subhanaka, you are very glorified, that you are above any kind of blame for what these people said and what these people did and how they behaved. أَنْتَ وَلِيُّنَا مِن دُونِهِمْ. You are our patron and our wali and our provider besides them, instead of them. بَلْ كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ الْجِنَّ. But the truth is they were worshipping something that was unknown and confusing. Not the jinn in the jinn sense, jinn in the literal sense. Although some people do worship the devil, who is a jinn, okay, this ayah seems to suggest it's more general than that. بَلْ كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ الْجِنَّ. The truth of the matter is that they were worshipping something that they speculated had authority, independent authority, and they didn't know too much about it. أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِهِمْ مُؤْمِنُونَ. Most of them, they believed in them, meaning the jinn, the unknown, factors of life, if you want to make it very broad and general. But as I said, you can also make it very clear that it means the jinn itself. If you believe that people worship the devil, and there are many devil worshippers out there as we speak. The angels, they respond not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs a response from them. Okay. The question might be that why does Allah even bother to ask angels when He is Maliki Yawmiddin? This is the Day of Judgment and He is going to do what He wants to do anyway. Why this process? So the process is for the sake of establishing adl and justice on the Day of Judgment, so that people don't assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going through this system of question and answer. Allah has given them the ability to respond to the allegations, the accusations, which are all true against them. And the angels will confirm that whatever Allah is saying is not only true, but He is above blame. Subhanaka. He is not responsible for what they did. So in that sense, the response of the angels is Subhanaka. That you are above any blame and any disability or discrepancy that they may launch against you, say that God is now accusing us with false evidence and false testimony and so on. Anyway, so the angel will be there to show the documentation for their deeds if they rebel on the Day of Judgment also, which may happen to certain people, as I just mentioned previously. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يَمْلِكُ بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا. So that is the day when some of you will not control or own neither benefit nor harm against and for each other. In this world, you may be deputized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which you are, even though you don't know it, and if you know it, you don't believe it, that it doesn't matter. But that's the truth. Allah has deputized you so that you may hurt and you may harm and you may benefit people through that process of deputization. On that day, Allah will not make you a deputy. On that day, you will not be able to harm anybody nor benefit anyone at all. وَنَقُولُ لِلَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا ذُوقُوا عَذَابَ النَّارِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ بِهَا تُكَذِّبُونَ. And then on that day, we will tell people who were guilty of injustice, that as a result of their injustice, that you will now taste the punishment of the fire. The one that you used to deny. The one that you said it doesn't matter, we'll take care of it then. Or the one you just flatly rejected. It doesn't exist, period. So Allah will say, okay, if it did not exist, then taste it. so that you believe it does exist now. Meaning the point is dhulm. The Quran always emphasizes that if people commit any form of injustice, there is going to be some repercussion on the Day of Judgment, if not here also. That's why it's called the Day of Judgment. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want anyone to get away with injustice, what they have done against themselves and against other human beings in this world needs a place where it can all be clarified and cleared, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seen by all as the just God, as the one who favors those who do good deeds, and as the one who is able to punish who don't do good deeds. This is the drive in these ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that if you believe you are deputized by Allah, then you will not commit injustice, because it's not yours in the first place. So whatever is the due to somebody else, then that due is because Allah has deputized that person to own that money or wealth or position or power or prerogative or authority. Right? If you strip people of their prerogatives and of their abilities, then that is also dhulm. So now, if a human being has this prerogative, and you come in and say, I'm going to deprive you of this prerogative, which is otherwise called a right in our language today, then that's also dhulm. That is injustice. And the Quran and Sunnah does not like any form of injustice. So you may inflict harm in this world, even though you believe Allah has deputized you. And if you don't believe, then you may inflict harm. It doesn't matter to you then, either way. Likewise, you may benefit if you believe Allah has deputized you. So offering somebody a position that they're not worthy of is a form of injustice. And especially when they're not worthy of that position because of favoritism, nepotism, or exploitation, or whatever. Or because you can control this person in this position. Whatever happens. Right. So لَا يَمْلِكُ بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا means that you're able to give somebody something that's going to benefit them, and you're able to deprive somebody in such a way that you can harm them. So this happens here. This won't happen there. Why? Because judgment will be final. And when judgment is final, Allah will tell people who are guilty of injustice that you must pay for your injustice and your manipulation and for your exploitation and your unnecessary domineering and domination over people and so on, to the extent of even treating animals badly. Right? As we know from the Sunnah. We don't do that either as a Muslim community and a Muslim civilization. So the Muslim civilization, when it sees itself as a deputy from Allah, of Allah, then it will not incorporate injustice in any way, shape or form in any aspect of life or government. It won't do that. Then you have to seek forgiveness from each other. As Umar radiallahu anhu's story, the famous story, he used to go out in the night in the streets of Medina, observing what's happening, what's not happening. And the intention was to help people who were in distress. So one night he found that there was a lot of noise coming from behind the wall. And he didn't like the idea there was noise at that time of the night, so he scaled the wall and everything else. So the owner of the house said, this is wrong, you can't scale my wall, this is private property. The government can't infringe on private property. This comes with Islamic civilization. Right. He just told her, I don't care who you are, you're Umar, you're Khalifa, you can't do this. This is wrong. Umar acknowledged, acquiesced and apologized, and he didn't find the person guilty of whatever he was doing. Right? Based on that, you don't, as a Khalifa of the Prophet ﷺ, and then as a general Khalifa of Allah, when you're deputized by Allah with this authority, through the Prophet ﷺ, you don't have the right to harm me. That doesn't give you the prerogative to harm me, even if it means scaling a wall and then spying on me and so on. The private rights of a private citizen, they usually usurp the rights of the government in Islamic civilization. Usually. It's not a golden rule, it's not exactly a scientific rule, if you want to call it that, but it's usually the case. So, on this day, Allah says that you will not have the milkiyya, la yamliku, la tamliku, that you will not own the right or the prerogative to cause harm nor benefit anyone. So you should prepare for that day in this world, believing that you are deputized by Allah, and use your money, your wealth, your knowledge, your power, your prerogatives, your authorities in such a way that it does not sound like you are exploiting the situation and you're manipulating the situation, which obviously is very difficult when emotions are involved. You know, the prerogatives, duties of husband and wife, and then the children and parent, and then the relatives and the siblings and all of that. In family matters is very difficult because the human being is flesh and blood. So it becomes difficult to manage all that. So there, the element of piety and taqwa is أَصْلِحُوا ذَاتَ بَيْنِكُمْ, repair the affairs between you, mend them, don't cause harm to each other in such a way that is going to be seen as dhulm, injustice. Then obviously in your community affairs and in your political affairs and every other affair in any civilization, this ayah speaks volumes to the emphasis of the Quran and the Sunnah and the Islamic civilization on not allowing anyone to commit dhulm, injustice. That's not who we are and what we are. We did not promote this, even as I said, against animals and other beings, as you know from the Sunnah. And as you know from the Khulafa Rashidun and every other Muslim government that came, we were very careful not to promote this as a norm. Now, the fact that certain Muslims did is not that the civilization appreciated this or accommodated it. It's just human frailty. Right? If somebody comes to the US of A and unfortunately listens to the news in Chicago and they assume this is what the value of American society is, that there's violence after violence after violence. That will be a wrong assumption, even though it happens. Right? If you turn on the news every night, local news, what do you hear? How many people are killed? Every day. If you saw that clip and you assumed this is what America's about, maybe it happens, but American values do not appreciate this. Okay? That's not the standard of this community and this society. Right? Meaning they don't promote it. They're not inviting people towards this behavior. It happens because of human frailties or because the system's not working, whatever. Likewise, when we read Muslim history, we should be careful not to judge Islam because of certain frailties committed by Muslims. The civilizational, what do you call it, portfolio is about adl, justice and service to Allah and service and altruism and spending on others, as the previous ayat speak of. That we as a civilization, we believe in spending and kindness and generosity and altruism. We don't believe in injustice in any way, shape or form. Now, unfortunately, as human beings, people always make mistakes and commit sins, and they commit violence also, and they do injustices that are mind-boggling. That does not represent the civilization as a whole, any more than anything that happens here represents the Constitution. Right? In that sense. So here the Quran is saying that this is going to happen on the Day of Judgment, so prepare for it by living a life here in such a way that inshallah you will not be afraid of the punishment of the fire. May Allah save us and protect us from such a life. May Allah save us and protect us from any kind of punishment in this world or in the world hereafter. Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. We'll see you soon. We are on break next week, so we'll see you, I guess, hopefully in 2 weeks, or some of you before that. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Alhamdulillah.